So, as of the 14th of October, the Renters' Rights Bill has almost cleared Parliament. The Lords have just sent it back for a couple of final tweaks, but the main changes are finally confirmed. Things like pet deposits, notice periods, and whether the courts are actually ready for it. So we're now this close for it to becoming law. In this video, I'll run through what's confirmed, what's not yet live, what I'm doing now as a landlord myself, and what it means for the tenants too. I'm not going to do the whole classic, this is awful for landlords thing, because it really isn't. It's just clearer rules and better standards. But the real snag is the courts. So why is everyone talking about the Renters' Rights Bill? Well, it's the biggest shake-up to renting rules in England for decades. Royal assent is expected any day, which is the next step, and then the government will announce when the new system actually starts, which is likely sometime in 2026. But there's a lot of waffle in there, so let's go through the main changes one by one in plain English. So the first big change is that no-fault evictions are ending. So that's section 21, the one where landlords could ask for a tenant to leave a property without giving any reason at all. Once this new law starts, that's going to go away. Landlords will have to give a valid reason instead, like they're selling the property, they're moving back into it, there are serious arrears or antisocial behaviour, and each will have its own particular notice period based on how severe that reason is. So for example, if I'm selling one of my properties with tenants in, I'm going to have to give the sale ground with the proper evidence and not just a blanket notice of eviction. The second big change is fixed term tenancies are becoming rolling instead. So every tenancy becomes periodic, which usually will be month to month. Tenants can leave with 2 months notice, and landlords will need to rely on those new grounds if they need the property back. It means it's just more stable for the tenants, and for landlords like me, it just means planning ahead a bit differently. I now work on rolling assumptions rather than fixed dates. And the third big change is rent increases are getting way simpler. So there's now one clear process for everyone, and it's once per year, to market rate, using a section 13 notice with 2 months notice ahead of time. If a tenant thinks the change is too high, they can challenge it at a tribunal, but then the tribunal can't raise it above what the landlord has originally asked for, and then it can't be backdated either. So for example, if you have a property where the rent's £1,000, the market's actually £1,050, then the landlord would serve a section 13 notice for that £1,050. If it's then challenged by the tenant, an independent decision made by a tribunal sets it, and that decision is final. The fourth big change for the Renters' Rights Bill is that there's now limits on upfront rent. So those 6 or 12 months in advance deals will be gone. The cap is 1 month's rent in advance, or 28 days if the rent's weekly, and it means it's fairer overall, but some international renters who used upfront rent instead of a UK guarantor will now have to lean on guarantor schemes or rent insurance instead. So this is just making it fair for all tenant applications across the board. As long as they can pay that 1 month's deposit and they can pay the ongoing rent, that's enough. So the fifth big change is kind of related to the previous one, where there's now no more rent bidding wars. So you advertise an asking rent, maybe £1,000, and you can't accept anything above it. So £1,050, and it just keeps things transparent. Yes, you can ask for slightly more if you include in things like pets maybe, but for the base rent it has to stay what you originally asked for. Now the sixth big change is more for the landlord side of things, which is a new ombudsman and a landlord register. Every landlord in the UK, like myself, will need to join the private rented sector ombudsman and register on the national database. And it gives the tenants a clear route to complain if there's a problem, and it helps councils just find those rogue landlords which aren't on any system. So for the decent landlords, hopefully like myself, it's basically a badge that shows you run things properly, and it's all above board. Now the seventh big change, and one I really agree with, is higher property standards. So the government's extending the Decent Home Standard and Awab's law deadlines into the private sector. So there'll be stricter timeframes for fixing hazards like damp and mould. And if you're wondering, Awab, named after Awab Ishaq, who was a 2-year-old who tragically died from mould exposure in 2020. The law that's in their name is the aim to stop that from ever happening again. And the eighth and final big change is one of the big talking points in the most recent Lords debate, and it's pets. The peers argue that landlords should have the choice of taking a small pet deposit instead of being forced into pet damage insurance, and the government's now weighing that up in the final text. What's certain is that tenants will have the right to request a pet, and landlords can no longer unreasonably refuse. Personally, I've rented with my dog myself, and I'm happy this is becoming more workable for tenants. In my properties that I own, I already allow some pets. I either price small wear and tear uplift, or I make sure there's proper insurance in place. So that just offsets any risk of having a pet do any damage. So those are the main changes that are happening for the Renters' Rights Bill. But the one thing that does concern me is the courts, and it's the practical wrinkle really. So once section 21 does go away, more cases are going to have to go through the courts. And the problem with the courts that right now the average time from a claim to repossession is about 28 weeks. That's around 6 to 7 months of potentially lost rent. So it's going to matter so much more that you have prevention in place and tidy paperwork, and it will speed things up rather than chasing things through the courts later. So with all these changes for the Renters' Rights Bill, what am I doing now as a landlord? Well, I'm doing 3 quick things. I'm updating my documents, so removing fixed term and rent review clauses and adding the once a year rent increase process instead, and a simple pet request section so decisions are calm and well written. I'm also keeping my evidence tidy, so I'm going to have clean rent ledgers, inspection notes, repair photos and confirmation emails. So if I ever need to rely on it, the paperwork can just do most of the heavy lifting. And the third thing is I'm fixing standards in my properties early. I do a lot of my own DIY around my 9 to 5 job, so I'm going to be trying to sort the ventilation, the seals, the alarms, all the certificates, and it's just cheaper and calmer to get ahead of the rules. But what's my take on this whole thing? Because it's quite controversial as a change. If we look at the big picture, this bill is about protecting people and raising housing standards, which I totally agree with. So I'm still investing in property because my focus has always been decent homes and sustainable numbers. And if it's nudging all landlords to be a bit more professional, well, that's fine. We just need the courts to keep up and speed up that process. But if you're watching this video and you're not a landlord, maybe you're a tenant, your security should improve from this. Rent rises should be more predictable and you can challenge them, and you have a fair way to ask for a pet too. But remember to keep your own paper trail because it just helps everyone. So that's the Renters' Right Bill in plain English. If you found this video useful, please give it a like and subscribe, it really helps the channel. And if you're thinking about becoming a landlord and you have maybe £20,000 to start investing, check out a video over here on how I'd begin in the UK with £20,000. Sources for everything I've been talking about are linked down below in the description, and I'll catch you in the next one.